So once again, good afternoon and welcome to our third session. Today we will have two topics, editorial writing and column writing. Then our speaker, allow me to introduce our speaker for today. He is a consultant of our school publication, The Coconut and Ang Niyog. Please welcome Mr. Abner Pureza. Enter ka.
After
Sige lang po. Start.
Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Abner Pureza, the consultant of the Coconut, and I'm going to share with you this morning the essentials of editorial writing and column writing. So I cannot claim that we will be discussing all about editorials and column writing, because if we say all about, it will take us probably a semester or two. So what I'm going to share with you is the essentials, the practical side of writing editorial and editorial columns. Because if we read the books, academic books on editorial, what the books will provide us will all be about theories, the types, the characteristics, but at the end of the day, we still do not know how to write an editorial. So for this afternoon, the format of the discussion would be, I'll be flashing some samples on the PowerPoint, plus we will identify what to be written in each paragraph. So editorial writing. Oh, it's not working, I'm sorry. So imagine there are two groups arguing about, for example, certain issue. For example, who between ABS-CBN and GMA7 is the top-rated television network. So one group will perhaps side with the ABS-CBN, and the other group perhaps would choose GMA7. So in other words, there must be an issue. So editorial writing is anchored on issues. Okay. So and there must be two opposing views for us to start writing our editorial. But let me first give you the requisites of an editorial writing. First, an editorial is based on an issue. That's why I have given you a sample who is the most watched or the most popular TV network, for example, between ABS-CBN and GMA7. So that's an issue. And there are two groups at least. One would prepare the ABS-CBN and the other group would prepare GMA probably. So first, an editorial is based on an issue having high degree of sensibility. So it's not just an issue per se, it must be having high degree of sensibility. So in other words, before we write an editorial, we have to determine whether the issue affects a lot of people, because there are issues that really do not matter to people. So it must be an issue which is something that affects majority of people. So in short, it should have high degree of sensibility to the public readers. It must be relatable and essentialized to the context of the people's lives. So in other words, an editorial must be something that the readers might relate to. So, and to be essentialized, it means we have to contextualize it to the reader's lives. Second, there must be two groups with opposing views in dealing with such an issue. So just like my example, there are two groups. One group favor the ABS-CBN and the other group favors the GMA7. Third, there must be a stand or position in which the group believes in. So that's self-explanatory, I suppose. Lastly, there must be pieces of evidence each group must present to justify their position. So, giving the position is not enough. So, the editorial does not end there. It must be well supported by pieces of evidence. Meaning, the position or the stand of the writer must be justified in the body or in the context of discussing the editorial. Now, let's have the key concepts on editorial writing. It's the collective stand of the publication. So in other words, even there's only one writer assigned to write an editorial, so that writer should have solicited the opinions of all the members of the staff to come up with their collective stand. So that is the rationale behind the reason why editorial should be presented in third person's point of view most of the times. But of course, the pronoun we, although that is first person, is an exemption to the rule because that's first person plural. It's understood that when we use the word we, there are many personalities involved. So it's still a collective stand of the publication. May naglip. So second, editorial is a heavy artillery. Why? Specifically, if we talk of editorial page as a whole, so it's the battlefield of opinions, views that compete for the reader's attention. So even you read the national dailies, the Manila Times, for example, you would note that the main editorial would be against the administration, but you would note that there are some columns there which are positive to the administration. So it's a battlefield of opinions. Now, it takes leadership position on issues affecting the community. So, editorial does not end on writing the article per se, but the editorial itself takes leadership position, especially in disseminating information to the public and in enlightening the minds of the public about certain issues affecting life in general. Then, focal points of editorial, obviously, if we will be reading the content of the books, there are lots of goals that editorial should fulfill, but it can be summed up into the following: to drive home a point, to influence public opinion, to enlighten people. To drive home a point, so in other words, there must be a stand, there must be a firm stand for us to drive home a point. Then to influence public opinion, it lies on our power of reasoning. How are we going? How our editorial is effective? How we comprehensively discuss the context of our article in order for us to influence public opinion. Then, enlightening people lies on the moral purpose of editorial. So our editorial should have moral purpose. Characteristics: an editorial should follow a pattern. So later on, you would realize that editorials could be written in different forms or patterns. It simplifies an issue, especially the complex ones. It provides opinions from the opposing viewpoints because we have to consider both sides of an issue. It presents evidence delivered in a formal manner. So in editorial, the language that we have to use are the standard ones. So, in other words, the formal language. It offers a concise solution. So the ending of an editorial must be something that gives concrete and practical solutions. Now, how to write an editorial? That's the question. And how are we going to come up with at least an acceptable piece of editorial article? So we start with preliminaries. How do we start? Obviously, we have to choose a topic. There must be a topic because we cannot formulate something out of nothing. Now, where do we get the topics for editorial? There are a lot of sources. It can be coming from screaming news, commissioned news, or trending news. When we speak of screaming news, these are news articles that are obvious. Most of the times, these are political news. The moment that you turn on your TV, the moment that you turn on your radio, or the moment that you pass by in a newspaper stand, you scan through the pages, the headlines. So that's screaming news. It follows you. Actually, naturally, you would know them. Then commissioned news, these are news being made by some organizations such as survey and researches. So there are a lot of sensible, or should I say relatable, commissioned news these days. So I remember one, it's about survey on federalism, for instance, and surprisingly 75% of Filipinos do not know about it. So that's something to write on. That's a good material for editorial writing. So it's a product of commissioned news. Then we can also make use of trending news as our topic and writing editorials. So as far as I remember, there are lots of trending news lately. So months ago, we have Chris versus Mocha in the social media. And then there was also President Duterte who made remarks, "God is stupid," or something like that. Then the installation of ex-President Gloria Arroyo as the Speaker of the House. So those are some trending news that happened recently. And there are a lot of trending news these days also. So those topics must fulfill the following qualities. Must be current and timely. So that is self-explanatory. When we say current, is something that is happening right now. Timely, it's almost synonymous. It's also something which is based on the recent time. Substantial for writing. So in other words, it must be something easy to write about. There are a lot of sources coming from interview. You can generate a lot of information from research, from your reading, so that makes it substantial for writing. It's like thesis writing where there should be lots of reference materials. Then the most important thing is it should pass on moral judgment, because at the end of the day, the duty that editorial should fulfill is how it was able to pass on moral judgment. Okay. So after we have chosen the topic, the next step is we have to obtain background material and information about the topic. And that could be achieved through observation, reading, interview, and doing some researches. So how can we generate information and background materials from observation? So we have to be a keen observer, just like a scientist, just like in my personal experience. So one time, I was riding in a jeepney and there were...
Medyo choppy ka po, Cesar. Yeah. Narinig nga lang sa
hello. So how can we generate background material and information through observation? So personally, as I said, one time I was riding in a jeepney and There were a group of old women talking about an issue, a local issue here in our place. And that issue is something that I do not know. So that issue is something that I do not know. And through their conversation, I was able to know that the PBP or the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino is very active here in Lucena City. So, reading. Obviously, we can generate a lot of information and background materials from reading. Reading newspapers, online sources or online version of newspapers, and other journalistic materials. So we can also get information from interviews. For example, if our editorial is about Deng Baksha, so probably to localize the context of our editorial, we can interview our health officer, provincial health officer, or if not available, maybe the city health officer. Then research. So there is no substitute for reading and research. So that's the primary sources of our information. Now we go to phase 1, the pre-writing stage. We already have a topic. We already gathered background information and materials related to our chosen topic. The next step is to identify our purpose and audience. In this part, we have to remember the types or the kinds of editorial. So it depends on, our editorial depends on the purpose that we have in mind. And somewhat, it also depends on the kind of audience who will read our editorial. Now, when do we have to write the informative editorial? So, by experience, we used to write the editorial of information if there is a policy which is not yet known by the majority of people. For example, if our topic is on federalism, we can write informative editorial on that, since based on the survey, only 25% of the Filipino citizens know about it. So there is a need for information dissemination, and that is what informative editorial is all about. Disseminating information. So it is applicable when our topic is a new policy or a government program wherein the public or majority of the public should know about it. So what about editorial of interpretation? So we write interpretative editorial when our focus is delivering the significance or the impact of an event to the lives of the people. Okay na. So that is the essence of editorial of interpretation. So our focus is to highlight the impact and the relevance of a certain issue to the lives of the people in our community and the people in our school or the people of the country as a whole. So for example, if we have a policy, say in our school, we used to have so for example, in our school, we have that certain policy of we have a strict policy in the entrance of our gate. So what is the relevance or what is the impact of that policy to the students' lives in general? So it lessens the number of students who come to school wearing not complete school uniform. right? Or for example, the impact of the train law. One of the impacts is the rising prices of prime goods. So if we write an editorial about it, then that's interpretative. Then we can also write an editorial of criticism if we try to highlight the problem arising from the situation or the problem arising from the event. Then obviously when we write praise editorial or editorial of commendation, we are trying to give good comments, or we are trying to praise an organization or a private individual for a job well done. So for example, when a group of individuals donated, for instance, a building in our school, then the donation is something that has addressed shortage of classroom, then we can write a commendation editorial for them. Or if you remember those famous political personalities, the time that they died, most of the people wrote an editorial about remembering Miriam Santiago or remembering Marcelo Bernan. So those are editorial of commendations. I mean,
medyo sabihin na kasi ang tingin niyo po. Sige, so yan ang natin konti yan. Pero mabaho mo malagay. Sige nga, sabi niyo po i-check. Ayan. Sige sir, imik po ulit kayo.
then what about persuasive editorial? So we write persuasive editorial when we are trying to promote a program, say Brigada Eskwela, and we want public support. We will be calling, or we're calling public support from stakeholders, from LGUs, from the parents of our students. Then persuasive editorial is one of the best things to write about. Then what about argumentative editorial? When do we have to write an argumentative editorial? If we want to highlight both sides, because there are some issues which has 50-50 pros and cons. So we write argumentative editorial if both sides of the issue is strong. Say 50% of the citizens support that particular issue, while the other 50% go to the other side or do not support that issue. So it's a good start for us to write an argumentative editorial. Wala na sound hindi. Hindi ko ma-forward.
Ano ba girl? I-enter yung under delete.
So we already have the topic, we already have materials or information about the topic. We already defined our purpose and we know our audience. The next step is to organize our information. So outlining is very important at this juncture. So we have to briefly outline the facts logically before writing our editorials. So there might be many details that we're able to gather. So we have to choose only the details that matter. Then after choosing the details, we have to order details according to importance. That's why there is a need for us to do some sort of outlining. Now, what is the danger, the common danger among beginners in writing editorial? So one of the greatest error they encountered is trying to say too much. That's why we have to choose only the details that matter. So they also believe that in order to be convincing, an argument must be utterly comprehensive, addressing every possible issue that relates to it. So in that sense, we will violate the principle, one of the principles of editorial, which is brevity. So an editorial must be essentialized. So in other words, we have to include only the essential things that matter, and we have to stay focused on the theme. So the next step is to craft an effective title. For some other writers, they write their title after finishing their editorials. But for some other writers, they craft a title first. So in this lecture, I prepared to craft a title first. So the title of an editorial is mostly composed of 1 word, 2 words, and 3 words to the most. So I highlighted the word mostly because there are some other newspapers with the editorial titles more than 4 words or so. So the title is a label head. So in short, it does not follow the SVO pattern just like in news and sports. The title of editorial is like a clause or a praise. Say for example, Killing It Softly or Remembering Miriam Santiago. So it's as label as that. So I have samples here. So I have Petal Attraction. This title of editorial is taken from New York Times when group of kindergarten students had their field trip in flower plantation, and then they pick up roses, then smell them, then most of them were sent to the hospital because those flowers now were dispensed by insecticides. So that's why the title Petal Attraction is something witty and it fits the article. So when there's election, there are always problems. So that's why when our article is about election problems, for instance, we can have a title like Election Blues. So the title must be striking to attract attention. So it might be coming from a title of a song. We will just substitute 1 word like Killing Me Softly. We can have Killing It Softly. That's one of the titles of our editorial 5 years ago, or I guess more than 5 years ago, when the collection for publication were tried to stop, put to a halt. So the main editorial we had is lack of funds, and that directive is something that killed campus journalism. So the title is Killing It Softly. So after we came up with the title, we're now in the phase 2, which is the writing stage. Now, it is important that we have an outline. So we should have an introduction. The introduction is mostly presentation of the situation or presentation of the news item. And then we have to inject our stand or our position on that particular situation. So we call it a news peg. The issue or the situation presented in the news plus the position. Then we have the body. We have to deliver our claims, and our claims must be fully supported by facts or proofs. So we have to remember the 4E. Explanation, evidence, example, and extra details. Those 4 E's are very essential in writing editorial because we have to explain the issue. We have to give evidence related to the issue. Somehow, we have to give example. And if the situation requires, we also need to give extra details. Now, how can we deliver the body of editorials? There are tools that we can use. We can make use of narrative of incidents. We can also make use of a statement from credible sources, specifically from those people in the government, those leaders in the government agencies. Then we can also make use of statistics. We can also make use of provision from a memorandum, or in case of the education department, DepEd order, or we can support our claims also by referring to bylaws, constitution, and other sources. Then, our editorial should have conclusion. There are only 3 parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion, which can be recap of the main points, or recommending a solution, or calling for an action. So it depends on the context that we included in the discussion. So I have here a sample of an outline. So outlining is important in writing or prior to writing an editorial. So possible title, then identify the situation, then give the position, then the claims. So in editorial, if you remember, there is such thing as 3-point rule, where the standard way of writing an editorial is there must only be 3 claims, and those claims or arguments must be supported by facts or explanation. Then each claim is a paragraph of its own, or somehow one claim can be 1 or 2 paragraphs. Then summary of the main points, then you have your concluding part. Now let's try to analyze this example. So it's taken from a national tale. So the title is "It's Not Over." So in our discussion earlier, I have mentioned that the title of an editorial should not be more than 3 words. So in this case, it fulfills the standard rule because the title of this editorial is only 3 words. It's not over. Now, the title should be related to the context of your editorial article. Let us try to analyze. So let me read. A Quality Court has handed out the death penalty to the employers of Joanna Di Mafelis, the overseas worker whose body was found stuffed in a freezer in February. Labor Secretary Sylvester Villo III said the sentence shows the sincerity and good faith of the Quality government. So that is the borrowed item from the news that defines the situation or the topic of the editorial. Then what is the position of the newspaper here? So it appears justice has been served. That is the given position of the newspaper. Now let us try to analyze. The title is "It's Not Over." So we realize that it is connected to the position. It appears justice has been served. So in this case, the editorial writer is not satisfied because the editorial writer did not say justice has been served or justice is already served. But the position given is it appears justice has been served. So it's a 50-50. That's why it has connection to the title. It's not over. Now let's have the next part. Di Maffei's death and its ignominy shocked a nation that was no stranger to the risks that workers face in foreign lands. Di Maffei's story was common indeed. She made the trip to act as breadwinner for her family. The manner in which she was killed, however, was revolting. The operative word is appears. Beneath the surface, many issues remain unsolved. So, in this paragraph, the position is explained. So, the operative word is appears, meaning to say, there is no satisfaction yet on the part of the editorial writer. Now, let's go to the claims. So, the next paragraph represents the first claim or the first argument of the writer. Let me read. Foremost, the employers, Lebanese Nadir Esam Asaf and his Syrian wife Muana Hazon were tried in absentia. The two fled Quiet City and were arrested in Damascus. The husband has been turned over to Lebanese authorities where he reportedly confessed to the killing. The wife remains in Syria. It's not known whether, when, or how they would be made to face the consequences of their action in Kuwait or anywhere else. Now, it justifies the position made that it appears justice has been served. Simply, the writer would like to say the justice is not yet complete. So, because after arresting the Lebanese employer, what happened? So, it is not known how or way they would be made to face the consequences. Everything ends with the arrest. And the wife, who is also an accessory to the crime, is still at large. So it is tally with the title. It's not over. It is also tally with the position. It appears justice has been served. Now let's have the next paragraph. Here at home, Di Maffei's recruiter, the owner of the Our Lady of Mount Carmel Global Solutions, remains in hiding. Again, the story is common. Unscrupulous recruiters only concern themselves with making the fees without ascertaining the actual risks they put the workers in. Sometimes the effects are economic. In other cases, like Di Maffei's, lives are lost. So in the second argument, or in the second claim, from universal context, it goes down to the Philippines. So the recruiter, because the recruiter is also an accessory to the crime, so the recruiter is still at large right now. Yeah. Okay. I hear some sounds feedback. So right now, the recruiter is not yet tracked. The whereabouts is not yet tracked by the operatives. So, what do you observe in the way this editorial is presented? So, the writer used deductive method from universal context going down to the Philippine context. Then, the third argument is what the administration is doing. Let me read. Administration officials are also still weighing whether the total ban on the deployment of workers to Kuwait should be lifted after the Kuwaiti court shows of good faith. The ban occasioned mixed reactions from the public. Some said it was an impractical, sweeping solution to a particular case. Kuwait a destination to more than 250,000 workers, while others agreed it was a proportionate reaction to a grievous crime. So, simply, it talks about the slow reaction, or should I say the slow action of the government, because the government officials are still weighing on the total ban on the deployment of workers to Kuwait. So, it also supports the title and the position. Finally, whatever the fate of the suspects, the case just goes to show the extent of the dangers faced by Filipinos who venture into other countries because of lack of opportunities in their home country. So that's a general statement saying that OFWs go out of the country because there's no enough job opportunities here. That's why in the process they met such kind of treatment from their employers. Then the next paragraph is recap of the main points. Then the last paragraph is the conclusion. Let me read. The Mafeles case is not the first heartbreaking OFW story. If authorities focus on this case but fail to consider the bigger picture and long-term situation, it will not be the last either. So it's an implied alternative, or is an implied recommendation that the government should consider crafting a long-term solution. Otherwise, this case won't be the last. So if we remember, we had before Sara Balabagan, we also had before Flor Contemplacion, and the case as talk of the town only for at least a month or 3 months, but after that I don't know what happened, or we don't know what happened. So just like in case of the Mafeles. So if we will be making an outline based on the context of that editorial, then this should be an exemplar outline based on that editorial. The situation, the Mafeles case and the quality government action. The position, it appears justice is served. Then we have the arguments. First argument, despite the arrest, it is not known where and when the employers will have to face the consequences. Then argument 2, the Mafeles circular is still at large. Then argument 3, government's slow action. Then we have concluding part, recap of the main points, and then the conclusion, serious and long-term solution to end similar cases. So that is a simple format, or that is a simple approach in writing editorial. Now we can also have other approaches. So, and I have a practical sample here to show the specs approach in writing editorial. So specs means S stands for situation, P stands for position, then E explanation, C conclusion, and the other one is solution, the last. So the title of this editorial that I'm going to share with you is Safety First. The situation is defined in the first paragraph. Let me read. The Department of Health revealed that more and more of our countrymen, notably overseas Filipino workers, are afflicted with the dreaded human immunodeficiency virus, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome, HIV or AIDS. It sounds really alarming. So that's the situation presented in this editorial. By the way, the title is Safety First. So it's a 2-word title. Now, what is the position of the writer here? There's an urgent need for the Department of Labor and Employment to invest more on HIV awareness and prevention among workers in general and OFWs in particular. So, the title Safety First is connected to the position that states there's an urgent need for the Department of Labor and Employment to invest more on AIDS awareness and prevention. Then the next paragraph is a support to the position made. It tries to show that OFW party list Representative Anisito Jan Bertis III has been crafting a solution to this. Then if you would note the context of discussion here, the body of editorial makes use of one of the tools that I mentioned earlier. It's more on statistics or presenting statistics. The previous example about Dimafelis, the tool that the writer used, very evident, was narrative of incident. Here, the writer presents a lot of statistics. So this is the body. It capitalizes on giving examples and evidence. So let's read the next paragraph. A total of 5,537 OFWs have either tested positive for HIV or have full-blown AIDS. They comprise 11% of the 52,280 cases listed in the Department of Health's National HIV Registry. This is very unfortunate because if we look at the median age of these OFWs at 32 to 34 years old, they are at the top of their lives in terms of potential workforce productivity. So the first argument is delivered using statistics, stating that there's 5,537 positive for HIV among the OFWs, which is exactly 11% of the total 52,280 cases in the National HIV Registry. Then when we present statistics, we have to at least we have to explain its significance. What is the impact or the significance of that statistics? So it is presented in the next sentence. This is very unfortunate. Specifically looking at the median age of these OFWs, 32 to 34 years old. So those are powerful workers, because they still have they at the prime of their age. So in terms of potential workforce, they are the most productive ones. Okay, next paragraph. So we have from the OFWs, again, the writer makes use of deductive method from the general from the group of OFWs. The C men are pointed out. Migrant workers, particularly C men, are susceptible to HIV infection because they are exposed to foreign cultures that usually encourage high-risk behavior, including casual sex. After spending lengthy periods at sea, C men are vulnerable at foreign ports of call, and they have the money to pay for readily available commercial sex services in foreign ports, Bertes said. So from OFW's group down to C-men group, and this is simply a narrative of action as what Bertes has noted. Then the next paragraph also gives statistics. In 2017 alone, an average of 41 Filipinos died every month due to HIV. Then what is the impact? It has worried the health and other government authorities, religious leaders, employers, and community leaders. Because 41 Filipinos dying every month is something big. While other countries have only 7, 10, then the Philippines have 41 cases. Then concluding part, we have the summary of the main points. Then we have the specific solution. It's definitely time for concerned government offices and agencies to act now in fast if we are to ensure the health and safety of the burgeoning Philippine population. So it's definitely a recommendation, at the same time a call for action, calling the concerned government agencies to act now and fast. So it is also connected to the title, Safety First. So that's how we should write an editorial. So the title, the position, the arguments, up to the concluding part should be connected with one another. By the way, this editorial article is taken from People's Journal, April 10, 2018. The previous sample is taken from Manila Standard. So if we will be studying the outline of that editorial, then here it goes. It makes use of the specs format. The situation is defined, OFWs getting afflicted by HIV. Then the position is, the Department of Labor and Employment needs to invest on HIV awareness and prevention campaign. Then in the process of explanation and supporting the position, mostly the writer may use of statistics. Then the concluding part, then the solution. Now for those advanced writers, we can do modifications because in writing editorial, we are not actually framed on the format. So for advanced writers, you can make modifications, and I have sample here of modified specs. This is somewhat a local article from our publication. The title is Curbing Illicit Activities. So the situation is defined in the first paragraph. Being the largest school in the division of Quezon, Quezon National High School has an average enrollment of 10,000 students annually. What springs from the big population is also a big problem, especially on safety for both students and teachers. So the situation is there. Our school, Quezon High, is the biggest in the division of Quezon. We had an average of 10,000 enrollment annually, and it goes along with the big enrollment goes along with lot of problems too, specifically on issues of safety for both students and teachers. Now, this editorial identifies the problem arising from the situation. Before giving the position, so it's a modified format. So after giving the situation, then this article gives the problem arising from that situation. In here it goes. Within the first 2 quarters of the current school year, 3 cases of relatives happened in the campus. This occurred separately on different dates. All these cases happened when major school activities are being held. While some students left their belongings inside their classroom, these thieves attacked. The most recent happened during the rehearsals of wellness program of the MAPI department. The thieves got through the grade 7 classroom and stole an expensive new DSLR camera, laptops, meaning more than one, money and other valuables that the students bring for their presentation and projects in school. So that's one of the problems arising from the situation identified. What's worse is that even teachers' room is penetrated by these intruders, stealing teachers' bags, money, cell phones, and other valuables. So not only classrooms, even the faculty rooms are not exempted. These thieves also cut through the faculty rooms and take away teacher belongings. Then, proposed course of action. Excuse me. Early this October, a grade 10 student stabbed a schoolmate because of heated arguments. The onset of cases like this alarmed QNHS community. For this reason, the PTA officers in the school administration collaborate to install surveillance cameras within the identified areas. As much as 112,000 PTA fund will be spent for CCTV installation. It's a big amount indeed, but with big purpose too. So after identifying the problems arising from the situation, then this editorial proposed what course of action is to be taken. Then after that, it gives position. Installing CCTVs within the school's vicinity comes as a form of pursuit from the fangs of thief, gang class, drug trade, and other untoward incidents happening inside the campus. Yes, because in the situation, it is said that the school has more students, and so there are also more untoward incidents, just like what is enumerated here in the position of this editorial. Then, explanation why the proposed course of action should be taken. The CCTV cameras are advantageous to QNHS grounds. It reduces fear of crimes. Numerous studies have determined the presence of cameras in public places lessen fear of crime in people who use the area. There is some reduced level of fear of felony among people in CCTV areas since people are aware that they are under surveillance. It also encourages people to be more security conscious. CCTV camera evidence can be compelling too. In a big school like QNHS, the long-range effects to crime prevention can be beneficial. So that supports the position that there is really a need for CCTV installation. Then what are the pieces of evidence? So let me read. It is a common knowledge that some outsiders enter the campus despite tight security measures. There is a chance that crimes such as drug trade happen using students as couriers. There have been reports about it, though witnesses fear to testify. In serious matter like this, police intervention is required. The potential of a CCTV system plays an important role in drug trade prevention. It contributes in a detection role. Camera footage can also help identify potential witnesses who might not otherwise come forward to the police. So this is an evidence also supporting the position made that there's really a need for CCTV installation in the campus. Then this is a related example. Relatively, CNN Philippines report, for instance, confirmed that a month after 32 CCTVs were installed at Pasig Rotonda last May 2015, weekly thief and robbery cases in the area went down from 50 to 10 to 3 cases, an 80 to 94% decrease. This implies the effectiveness of surveillance cameras to lessen untoward incidents. Thus, if CCTV cameras are fully installed in Quezon National High School, the same probability in reducing thieves, drug trade, and gang troubles will surely have positive result. So, this paragraph gives example of how effective CCTVs could be. Then, the concluding part, summary of the main points, and then the conclusion. What can be said as this juncture is that CCTV inside QNHS aids in monitoring possible intruders and their movements in a less intrusive manner. So despite some teachers' negative reaction on privacy matters, QNHS community in general finds a silent partner in curbing unlawful incidents inside the school premises. The Coconut staff gives it full support to this noteworthy partnership between the PTA and the school administration, hoping that not only 10 but more CCTVs must be installed in all vantage points of the campus. So the concluding paragraph is a recommendation that not only 10 but more CCTVs must be installed for effective implementation of tightened measure about safety measure inside the campus. Tightened security measures inside the campus. Okay, I have here another sample of an editorial article. This time, it makes use of the IPOROSAC pattern. This is an argumentative editorial. The IPOROSAC pattern is common in argumentative editorial wherein we try to highlight both sides of the issue. Then obviously, we have to present first the issue which are not taken by the writer. The strongest point that I consider as opposition. And then after the main point or the strongest point of the opposition, then we have to reject that point by injecting our own position. So again, the title is 3 words: ensuring privacy rights. So the situation is given in the first paragraph. Despite issues on privacy rights among citizens, the government can proceed to issuing national ID after President Rodrigo Duterte signed on Monday the Philippine Identification System o PhilSys Act into law. Then what follows is a background. The next paragraph gives the background. The ID cards contain basic details about the individual citizen, such as name, sex, birth date, birthplace, and address. Now, what is the importance? Why this editorial include a background? Because the main point of this editorial is privacy rights. And in national ID system, we have to give our data, our profiles, such as name, sex, birth date, birthplace, and address. And somehow, probably some people think that it is not safe to give the profile. Now, let's look at the strongest point of the opposition. So in other words, the strongest point of the opposition is the point not favored by the editorial itself, or the other side, which is not taken by the editorial itself. The national ID law will integrate the different IDs issued by the government, and the citizen will only have to present one card for all transactions. So that's the strongest point of the opposition. We are not required to present more IDs, but in all of our transactions, we can use only one. The law is expected to cut red tape and provide the public additional protection against terrorism and other security threats. It comes as a legislative priority agenda of the Duterte administration to improve the delivery of government services. So the strongest points of the oppositions, we have present one card for all transaction. We also have improved the delivery of government services and to cut red tape in the corrupt system of the government. Now, let's see how it is rejected. So, it's highlighted. It's not as simple as that, however. So, that's how the point of the opposition is rejected. Then, after the rejection, we have to reason out. We have to give strong arguments why did we reject that point. Here it goes. The ID system has never completely hurdled objection that it could pose threats to the security and privacy of the ID card holders. Right up to the time President Duterte signed the PhilSys Act into law on Monday, there remained nagging questions about the measure, particularly on the aspect of safety of the cardholders' information. So basically, the first argument why the point of the opposition is rejected is on matters of the cardholders' information. How is it really safe? Then, the next argument, remember, it fell short of passage under two presidential administrations. The ID system was first introduced during the time of former President Fidel Ramos through Executive Order number 308. It did not push through after the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional, citing the need for legislation. So the second argument why the opposition's idea is rejected is that it is claimed by this editorial that the national ID system is unconstitutional. Then the third argument, another attempt was made during the term of former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo through Executive Order number 420, synchronizing all government-issued ID cards, calling it the Unified Multipurpose Identification System, or the UMID. UMID was issued by select government agencies, but it has not served as a national ID card. So meaning to say, there was a move during ROU administration, but it also failed. And now that Duterte has signed the PLCS Act into law, the nation will start living under a single and a streamlined identification system. And as you can see, as explained in this part, the national ID system would violate the right to privacy and infringe on civil liberties, as claimed by this editorial. Then we have the summation part, the weighing in. Who are those countries using national ID system already? We have Belgium, China, France, Germany, Italy, South Korea, Singapore, Spain, and other countries. And it is said here that perhaps the most persuasive argument for it is that a good universal ID system will make the delivery of and access to public services more efficient. But this editorial doubts that in the Philippines, there's always doubt because our system is entirely different from the system of those countries mentioned. That's why in the next paragraph, it is said that, but still it is a false choice to suggest that we, citizens, must choose between better public services and privacy rights. In the first place, we should have both. Then the conclusion, once and for all, Congress must persuade the nation that the national ID system delivers worthwhile public services, and it will not be a problem to one's right to privacy. So it's a suggestion, a recommended course of action. Then this editorial is taken from the Manila Times. Now, this editorial follows the IPOROSAC pattern. The situation or the introduction, national ID system, position, there must be an assurance of privacy rights among citizens. Point of the opposition is presented in the second and third paragraph. Then the point of the opposition is rejected in the fourth paragraph. Then strong arguments that support the rejection is in the fifth and to eighth paragraph. Then the conclusion is in the last paragraph, wherein the writer gives recommended course of action. So if we have to outline that editorial, so maybe we can have this scheme. Possible title, situation, position, claims, because this is an argumentative editorial, so we have to highlight both sides. First, we have to give the opposition side, or the side that is not taken by the editorial writer. Then you have the weighing in and the concluding part. Now, if we assess the sample editorials, they differ in approaches, they differ in formats. But what is common among those sample editorials? So all of those editorials were able to state the problem or situation. All of those sample editorials were able to give position on the issue or the problem. Then all of those editorial were able to give background or explanation of the problem. Somehow, all of those editorials were able to summarize the main points, and it was able, or most of those editorials previously discussed were able to offer solution to the problem, or some really give call for an action. So in other words, in editorial writing competition, it doesn't matter what approach or what format you will use, as long as the presentation is good, because what is counted at the end of the day are these things. An editorial or a comprehensive editorial must have stated the situation or the problem, must have a position, must have an explanation or justification of the position made, must summarize the main points, and must have an appropriate conclusion, which can either be giving or recommending alternative solution to a problem or calling for an action. Now, we also have some alternative approaches in writing an editorial. So, the previous samples were all standard or formatted editorials. Now, we can make use of the developmental approach in writing editorial. This is more on citizens journalism approach because developmental editorial is somehow reform-oriented. So it has two P's, purposive and pragmatic. Purposive in the sense that it gives arguments as a way of social communication in the service of development. Pragmatic because it presents arguments based on practical considerations delivered in a light manner. Then I have sample in the forthcoming slides. Then we can also come up with forward-looking. But then this is dangerous because only the expert editorial writers probably can craft a successful forward-looking editorial. So forward-looking with reference to present condition. Now let me give you a sample of developmental approach. So actually it's main editorial of our school paper that won in the NSPC this 2018, just recently. So the title is Shared Identity. So 2 words. So along with the DepEd's trust to uphold the inclusive education among public schools lies an effort to make it accessible to all types of learners, regardless of color, race, gender, religions, and physical condition. This trust has cultivated a positive impact in the mindset of Quezon High regular students who are now embracing the concept of diversity. So the issue here or the news item here is the implementation of inclusive education in our school. And then the position is it has cultivated a positive impact in the mindset of regular students who are now embracing the concept of diversity. Because in the previous years, prior to implementation of inclusive education, there were cases of bullying, there were students who are different are being bullied or they are exposed to dangers. Now I did not type the entire sample, but I would like to highlight that the points discussed in the body of that editorial in the second paragraph. Quezon High students' culture before inclusive education was introduced. There were bullying cases, apathy to co-students who are different. Then in the third paragraph, a narrative of incident how inclusive education is introduced. Then in the fourth paragraph, discussion on the impact on how inclusive education has reformed the academic and social culture among students. From being apathy to students who are different, they are now getting along with them. And presently, you cannot distinguish the IPs and even the SPED classes to regular students because the IPs or the indigenous groups of our students mixed with the regular students. And they exactly look the same in terms of the way they dress, the way they speak. That's one of the good things about this inclusive education. Then the per paragraph discuss the relevance of inclusive education to school's mantra, which is a caring school. Then the sixth paragraph talks about problem inclusive education in Quezon High still faces despite positive results. Then the ending here is In the seventh paragraph, call for action, support from the local government and from the DepEd in general. This is the actual editorial article. Now, let me jump to forward-looking. I have here a sample. So, a statement of the news or the topic. It's actually, this is an old article. It is still about Keto 12 before Keto 12 kicks off. So, it's about time we revisit the foundation years in a Filipino child's life, his education from kindergarten to grade 12. Let us begin with a conclusion in mind. Then what follows are paragraphs wherein you can see the forward-looking claims. Let me read. By the end of this schooling period, Filipino youth are able to decide on the career path they want to pursue in their lives. This is the key advantage. Okay, sorry, the spelling is the N is doubled. The key advantage of this broad-based educational system aimed at cultivating a holistic personality among learners who would showcase a stronger passion for education. Likewise, they will demonstrate unprecedented competitiveness in the fast-evolving knowledge-intensive globalized society. So that's one of the forward-looking claims. Then, debatable from the onset, the system has taken hard blows from the critics of the present administration. The economic circumstance tops the thorny objections seconded by lack of preparation, boiling down to claims of the swift implementations being nothing but ambitious. Then, the stand, the reality check, or the position. The program is now off the ground airborne. The best thing we can do is to support it. Then the forward-looking claims are made because or in reference to the present condition. And the present condition is that the goal of the system adaptation is to support our students by absolute means. Exposure to innovative teaching techniques leads to substance of high-quality education, which also ensures teaching staff efficiency. Then these are all the situations, the current situation in which Keto 12 program has been running through the years. Yan. Then summary of the main points, then call to action. All of these are positives. Let's all be positive about Keto 12. So this article was taken from Ms. Cha Aguilar's files. No. So I'd like to give credits. Now, before we proceed, I'd like you to know, I would like to introduce our editor-in-chief here, our student Wendy Rose Diaz, to share some of her insights on editorial writing.
So, I'm Wendy and I'm the editor-in-chief, and to give my insights about editorial writing. I am really not into editorial writing, so what I can just say about it is I know how to produce an article about it, and I'm aware of how it will go and how are the things or how am I going to compose it. There are the first you need to do the or to include the situation and then your stand, and then you will have to provide proofs and proofs regarding, or proofs to be able to support your stand. And as for the summary, you just need to summarize all your points for the readers to be clarified about what you are pointing out on your article. And then for the conclusion, it's either you give it a call for action and or a very effective or somehow a solution to the situation or the problem. And I find it somehow hard to construct sometimes because it's either I'm not that aware of the situation and I'm not I'm not familiar about the topic I am writing about. So the key to be more familiar, I think, is like what Sir said earlier, is to be a keen observer, to research, and of course to watch news and read newspaper and articles online if possible. And it is also relevant if you are really aware of what are the things happening around you, especially local or national, internationally, or if in my case, it is really important for me to be aware of what is happening inside the campus I am going into. So the next thing, sorry, I don't know what to say next. I'm out of words. So what should I do?
That's all right.
The next thing is I'm lack of words here.
Just be aware, just keep on reading.
And in my case, since sometimes I'm so busy doing school activities or sometimes homework, there are times when I am barely watching news, to be honest. And but when I have my time, I have a lot of time or somehow an extra time, I would always try to somehow go read the latest newspaper, anything, PDI or Philippine Daily Inquirer will do. Sometimes when it isn't available, then I would go to Philippine Star, Manila Bulletin, and the other broadsheets. And then when there are no newspapers available at home, I'm going to consult I'm going to read articles online, and I can say that it is also useful, for it is more updated than the daily newspapers. And when it comes to watching news, I am watching news. It's either every night if I'm not busy, and then every morning before going to school. And somehow I'm always updated to the current happenings, and I am practicing myself to always read, watch, or find means to at least be aware of what is happening around. And going back to editorial writing, it is easy if you are aware, if you know how things will go on how you're going to write, and just remember the format, or you like what Sir said earlier, you don't need to focus always on the format you're using. What the important thing is, you know how to present your facts well, your stand, and then don't you know how to clarify your stand, and you know how to make the readers understand what you're saying. And yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Wendy. Now we will move on to the next part, which is column writing. So questions will be entertained after column writing po. So column writing, somehow there are a lot of editorial columns, obviously, because that's part of editorial page. But column writing is not limited to editorial page only. Now, what is column writing? What are the purpose or purposes of column writing? First and foremost, columns try to explain the news. So it delves deeper, it discusses further what is presented in a fact-based news. So it's a news beyond the news somehow. It goes beyond the mere who, what, when, where, why, and how. So in short, it explains the news. Second, it points out how the event will affect or not affect the readers. So columns, whether editorial column, science column, feature column, or sports column, tries to point out the relationship of a particular event to the lives of the readers, whether it affects directly or indirectly, or it doesn't have any effects. Then somehow editorial column or other kinds of columns such as feature or science is designed to entertain the readers, and I guess it serves the entertainment function of journalism. Then column writing is a bit longer than the main editorial because it allows you to have an approximately 500 to 850 words. That's according to Dr. Michael Andrada of University of the Philippines Journalism Department. So as far as the length is concerned, it may be a bit longer than the main editorial. Then it's an article in the newspaper giving opinion or perspective. So this is anchored on facts, and based on the facts, the writer will give opinion. Its opinion of the columnist, in contrary to the main editorial that it's a collective stand, this time column writing is the personal opinion of the columnist himself or herself, not necessarily shared by the staff. So columns are the most personal of all newspaper writing because if you would note, if you try to browse into newspapers pages, this is the article where the picture of the columnist is laid out and it has a regular column title, so that makes it personal because the picture of the writer is there, and the approach is somewhat also personal. So columns have a very personal appeal, authoritative influence, very useful contribution to make it in spreading news and opinions. So personally, I also follow some columnists, because they have I've been accustomed to the personal appeal they have. They have influence on me, to be honest. So columns are written to inform, because there are some columns which give instructions on how to do things and some others. It may also be written to influence. Some other columns also highlight a point in which it attempts to influence you in such a way that you would believe in what they are saying. Or probably some are witty enough to entertain readers. So columns are high in reader interest for they stimulate public discussion of the day's affair. So the topics may be something local, something community-based, something of national interest, or anything else, any facets of life. It could be about latest fashion, it can be about a book review, or it can be about what teenagers can relate to. What are the sources of topics in column writing? We can make use of the existing current news as our topic in writing columns. Like for example, when President Duterte delivered a statement saying that Naga is or has become a Shabu capital, then you can write a column about it. That's a current news. Or we can also make use of things we noted in our observations. Why most teenagers today, for instance, are addicted to gadgets. So that's based on observation. And in the course of discussion, we have to deliver facts. What are the reasons why they are addicted? And what is the impact of that addiction? Like for example, the survey among Asian countries that most Filipino teenagers are zombies. Zombie, not literally zombie, not literally Walking Dead, but the definition of zombie is those are people who lack sleep. They have sleeps only 2 hours or less for a day. So that's an observation. And what else? You can write practically anything that you observe around. That can be a topic for your column. Like why there is a rise of pornosexuality. Yun. Then you can do research on what makes pornosexuality. Then, or you can also make use of the interview transcript in writing your editorial column. Say you interviewed a certain senator, and then out of that interview, you can craft your column. Commendable projects, yes. Specifically, those noteworthy projects, something beneficial to majority of people, especially the less fortunate ones. Or maybe people researches can also be a topic for, or it can be a good topic in writing columns. Those researches must be something that offers practical solutions to some problems that we are experiencing daily. Say for example, a certain individual was able to invent a medicine that would cure a broken heart. No, I'm just kidding. A certain individual invented, for instance, a fuel, a gas or a fuel out of banana sap. So that's just an example. So it's a product of a research. Then we can also write our column to based on the outcome of an investigation. Now, what are the types of column? So obviously, we have editorial column because in the editorial pages of our publication, it is flooded with editorial columns. What makes an editorial column? It's a personal column found on the editorial page discussing sensible, current, and timely topics that most of the people can relate to. In case of campus publication, most of the students can relate to. It makes use of humor to drive home the message. But sometimes the column might be too serious. And yet sometimes there are columns witty enough to drive home the message. So editorial column is the highest expression of press freedom. Why? Because practically it's written by a certain columnist, and that columnist can deliver what is in his or her mind, provided that provided that it follows the concept of responsible reporting. Aside from editorial columns, we have readers column. Just like in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, they have that young blood section wherein they entertain the letters sent by or an article sent by a reader to be published in their newspaper. It may be a comment sent in by the readers, just like comments about some sensible issues in the community, or it may be somehow a letter to the editor format wherein it tackles an issue and the editor gives corresponding answer or point of view about it. So it can be about business column, something that deals on something that discusses something on economy, trade, commerce, and industry. So my favorite is sports column. So it deals on sports issues and concerns, especially now that we have the 2018 Asian Games. So any observation can be transformed into a column. Art column, it deals mostly on painting, architecture, flower arrangement, paper mache, ikebana, and the like. So art column, if your topic is, for example, why Mona Lisa's smile is like that, so maybe you can write, you can investigate why Mona Lisa has that kind of smile. So that has something to do with art. Or for example, why the oblation, UP oblation statue positioned that way. So that's art column. Women's column concerns itself about something that most women can relate to. Latest fashion, beauty tips, or anything about homemaking, or somehow anything about culinary arts or so. Entertainment column may be about music, theater, cinema, and the people involved them. So you would note that in some broadsheets, there is always a page for movie review. So if there is a picture of the columnist plus a review of the movie, then it's an entertainment column. Or somehow they have song review, the social relevance, for example, of the song. I forget the title of that song, yung Masdan mong nakaupo. I forgot the title. Or any song that has social relevance can be reviewed. So it may be about new products and inventions. It may be a personality column, something that plays up a famous person, his or her significant achievements, his or her activities, dreams, and ambitions. So a track, a personality track. Review of an article, a book, a movie, a drama, or a painting. So it overlaps with the other type previously cited. Then what are the types of columns? According to content, we have opinion column. So it's commonly found in the editorial page. It resembles an editorial in form, but in contrast with the editorial's impersonal and anonymous approach, it carries the personal stamp of the writer's own ideas. Because the main editorial has no byline. Here, in opinion column, it carries the byline and the personal, not really personal information, but it is something personal. Because it has a byline, it even has a picture of the columnist himself or herself. The hodgepodge column. So in this type, the author lumps together odds and ends of information. A poem here, an announcement there, a pointed paragraph, a modernized proverb, a joke, or an interesting question. So it is effective if the writer is good in making ironies. Ano? So, something that really make people entertain. It may be witty, like changing some popular quotations, like for example, nowadays the LGBT community is looking forward to legality of same-sex marriage. Then probably you inject the popular quotation anyway, behind every man's success is a woman, but you are not sure today because in our time, behind every man's success could be another man. No? That's some kind of a hodgepodge column. Then we have essay column. So you're very familiar because most of the columns circulating in daily newspapers today are in form of essay. Then the gossip column, somehow related to it's common in tabloids, somehow related to activities of movie stars in the entertainment world. But somehow politicians can also be topic of gossip column. Now let's be familiar with the structure of a column. A column should have a regular title. Say ink drops, that is your column. Whenever your publication comes out, you're always the author of that column. It's exclusively for you. Then it has also a headline. So in crafting the headline of a column, some suggestions are here. Try to use some alliteration. Just like if you remember, alliteration during our English classes is the initial repetition of consonant sounds. Money matters, so both starts with M. Silent session. So an editorial column is very effective if the title is using some kind of alliteration or anything witty. Maybe it can be an irony, or maybe you can use a pun, such as crafting a word from spectacular. For example, you have spectacular when your topic is a sped student who won in international competition, or when you observe that most college students are indulging themselves in prostitution once they have major examination. So you have prostitution. So these are effective titles of columns. Then a column should have a byline or the name of the writer. Now, how do we write the column? We start obviously with the lead or introduction. The lead or introduction must be a hook statement, but it must clearly present the main points. Now, according to Dr. Andrada of UP College of Mass Communication, the three of the effective leads of column writing are the following. You can give shocking statements or shocking statistics rather. Take for example this one. The Department of Education confirmed that public school teachers debt has reached 300 billion. This is the accumulated value of teachers' loan from GSIS amounting to 178 billion in Pag-ibig Fund with 120 billion excluding the loans from private lending institutions. What are the shocking statistics here? Okay, that's how big the loan of the teachers are. 178 billion only from GSIS and 120 billion only from Pag-ibig Fund, not including other loans from private lending institution. Isn't it shocking? Oh, somehow yes. Whereas that's how the accumulated amount of teachers' loans are. Or you can start your column with a controversial statement. Just like prostitution is everywhere in Lucena City. What is more shocking is that there are more males involved in this trade than the females. City DSW office reported. What makes the statement controversial? Because when we speak of prostitution, obviously, we stereotype that mostly indulged in this trade are females. But to our surprise, there are more males involved in this trade than the females. Then you can also start your column writing with a rhetorical question, just like this one. If we have forgiven the Japanese that easy, why can't we forgive Marcos? So that's a rhetorical question, something that requires something that evokes reasoning in the process. Then the body of our columns should be 2 to 5 supporting facts. Each fact is on its own paragraph. Then what contains the body of our column article? It should have a point. So that point comes from a fact. It should have a proof. Paraphrase or quote an external source, a statement of same or related incident, something that justifies your point. Then after you justified your point by giving proofs, go into analysis. Comment on fact and proof presented. Write about your opinion on the facts that you have included. Then, if possible, you can have transition into a personal experience. So, this is optional. Then, the concluding part. Conclude by creatively restating your main point or finish with a statement linking to your lead. Somehow, a call for action works well if that is required of the discussion in the context of your column. So, I have here a sample column. So it starts with a shocking statistics. So look at the title, More Isn't Enough. So it's a kind of oxymoron, more but isn't enough. It also evokes irony. So let's have it. Let me read. The Department of Education confirmed that public school teachers debt has reached 300 billion. This is the accumulated value of teachers' loan from GSIS amounting to 178 billion in Pag-ibig Fund with 120 billion excluding the loans from private lending institution. This is actually the sample earlier. Then, what is the position? It sounds alarming. There is an urgent need for DepEd to launch financial literacy program to educate them, the teachers, on how to manage their finances. Then look at the body of, this is a sample of an editorial column. That's why it is an issue-based one. So look at the body. So it has a point, then there are proofs. Then in the next paragraph, there is an analysis. So the point is highlighted in red. The proliferation of private lending institutions lure teachers to borrowed money since the salary they receive cannot suffice even the simplest cost of living. That is the point or the claim. Then, what are the proofs? And a teacher 1 with a salary of 20,000 is just enough for a single person's expenses for a month. The high cost of living brought by high prices of basic commodities adds difficulties to teachers' financial struggles. The 2017 DepEd statistic revealed that 7 in every 10 teachers are breadwinners of the family. Their salary is consumed by their family's basic needs. They usually fall short of finances when unexpected expenses come. So they resort to loans in private institutions who are more friendly and accommodating. In fact, DepEd states that 86% of teachers nationwide have loans to City Savings, PR Bank, SWest, Manila Teachers Mutual, and other lending institutions. Those are the proofs. Then the analysis. What comes out in the analysis is this way. 49% increase, on the status of teachers' loans since Secretary Bunis assumed her cabinet post in 2016. Then the implication, apparently such numbers speak of through teachers with big families have no choice but to keep on renewing their loans to make both ends meet. Sometimes the only option left for them is to make loans to provide their family's needs. Now, in the next part, although it's not anymore written, the paragraphs are not provided here, but the point presented is of all the professions, teachers have the most personally shouldered expenses. Then what are the proofs? So it is enumerated that engineers and others have allowances for travels, hotels, all materials for their projects, whereas teachers, despite your allowance, spend personal budgets on visual aids, ICT resources, professional growth, training, education, and other needs. Then children's education and related family expenses. Then there's an analysis. Then the point 3, another point is Secretary Bunis' directive to stop all loans from private lending companies at burden to teachers. What are the proofs? And it's provided in the O36 series of 2017, and teachers are resorting to 5-6 with 20% interest. Then analysis. Then point number 4, teachers overspending. What are the proofs? Luxurious lifestyle, travels and vacations, purchase of gadgets, personal belongings. Then analysis. Then concluding part, yan, it is suggested to have a comprehensive financial literacy program or salary increase. Now, in dealing with variety of column pieces, we can write something about national or regional issues, local or school concerns, global issues, human interest issues, provided that these issues are connected to local experiences. So I have another sample, but I guess we only have 7 minutes left before 5 o'clock. So this time, maybe you can ask questions if you want. On the question of where can you find the presentation on photojournalism, maybe Sir Ian will have to answer that. Where do we can find the presentation daw in photojourn? Kinat-kunat, ano?
Saan nag-chat mo?
So, is there any more bloody reactions or questions? For 5 minutes, we can have Q&A, editorial and column writing.
Wala.
Okay. So what shall we do now?
Pwede naman tayo mag-exit.
So, if there is no more questions, we promise to upload the materials in as short as time possible after all the sessions are done. So maybe anytime this week, we promise. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. See you again next Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our participants today. So that ends our discussion on editorial writing and column writing given by Mr. Abner Pureza, our consultant for the Coconut and Ang Niyog, as well as one of our editor-in-chief, Wendy Diaz. So on Thursday, our schedule will be same time and we will be having the topic on feature writing. So we are looking forward to seeing you again on Thursday. So I believe there are no more questions since no one is placing or typing on our chat box. Yes, and we're sorry for some technical problems we encountered earlier, especially with our audio. So we're not sure whether it's with the distance of our speaker to the laptop, or I think it has something to do with the internet connection as well, because I believe in the middle of our conference we're able to reach, or we're able to recover the good audio quality, or the audio quality that we're supposed to have. So I think there are no more questions. We'll see you again next time. Thank you very much once again for being with us today. See you po on Thursday.
Parang mahina ang connection kanina talaga. Nakalapit na kasi ako.
Nag-left na sila lahat. Sandali lang po.
There's plenty.
Ano sa inyo ating?
Kung saan ang formal discussion.
Siya kasi yung ating ano yata.
Ha?
Siya appreciated. My God, hindi kaya ito na ano.
Ha? Hindi na record?
Hindi po, yung ano sa ito dito. Parang hindi na-record.
Okay. Wala tayong record.
Ano nga ba? End meeting or leave meeting?
Ayan.
My God, hindi ko na-record. Pero nag-ano siya eh.
Practice naman yung context ng column writing ay na-discuss.
Oh. My God, hindi ko
May
siya na ano. Lagot ako kay sermon. Hindi, pero binabasa ko yung ano eh. Naman itong...
Anong hindi ng ano?